Welcome to Stitch Happens, a podcast that celebrates the creativity and vision of designers from every background and corner of the fashion world. This is episode number 2, and my name is Mikelle. We will be discussing in this topic today designers' tools like 3D technology, where designers can build 3D garments on avatars and also models. The benefits of 3D is such as cutting down on waste in the design process and also creating a quicker turnaround for sample making. We have come a long way, Mikelle, from sketching.
Yes, we have.
Right? We came from the era where hand sketching, Illustrator, and Photoshop, those were the big technologies of the day. So,
Yeah.
seeing from where we came from, as a professor at FIT, how has 3D helped students with the design process and or their portfolios, reviews, and also presentations?
Well, one of the biggest times that it was really important was during the pandemic, because I remember teaching and like right in the middle of the semester, we were sent home. And so a lot of my students, I mean, I was doing computer programs, but the other classes that the students were taking, they were like sewing classes and draping and things where they had to create physical garments. And, at least at the beginning of the pandemic, like we couldn't be anywhere where other people were.
Right.
So it was like, okay, how are we going to have the fashion show? How are we going to present our final garments when we can't like sew it and and touch and feel and do any of that?
Right.
And so that was one of the ways that it started to emerge even bigger, because you could create those garments in the 3D space. You can do your pattern, you can drape it on an avatar, and you can even animate it and make it walk the runway.
Correct.
And it all in a digital space. So we had been like slightly talking about it, and it was like, oh, that would be cool, but I think that was when it really took off, and now it's become a much bigger conversation where people are really understanding there's so many more benefits to this.
Yes. Yeah. So you remember this was in 2020, and I looked it up when we saw that first 3D digital runway show with those pieces walking down the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Because to your point, and even the start of this conversation, look at how far technology has taken designers. Because
Yeah.
at some point in designer life, everything again was hand sketched, or it was painted, or it was something that was a little bit more watercolors and artistic, and we still brought that artistic creative side into design, but we're now doing it at a level that is enhancing our abilities so far in advance that is helping us, which is amazing. So now let's discuss AI and fashion. So AI has given a real world simulation of how fabric stretches and moves depending on the cut and also the make of the fabric. And also it enhances the 3D design process. AI can also predict trends, personalize designs, and also generate design ideas. So, Mikelle, what do you think about AI? Is it going to help us as designers, or is it going to hurt us as designers?
I think it can, much like with any technology, it can be helpful when used properly,
Correct. Yes.
when used for good, but I think we're going to go through a period of where people are going to feel like, and I feel like we went through this with Illustrator, the other AI. Illustrator, when we first started using that, it was like people felt like they could just press a button and magically it happens, right?
Yes.
And there are some tools that you can sort of do that,
Right.
but the reality is, I think that for a lot of people, they're going to feel like they don't need the skills. You still need the skills,
Correct.
because what AI is doing outside of the data aggregation, that like forecasts and helping you figure out what styles worked last, like that's a whole different thing, and that's amazing. That's very helpful.
Right.
But on the creativity side, most of what it's doing right now is it's creating a picture, a
Hmm.
very interesting picture,
Right.
very pretty picture, but
Right.
it's a picture, right? And also understanding that this is a machine that's
Uh-huh.
learning from the inputs that you're putting in.
Right.
So it's not a machine that's learning from the professors at FIT
Right.
or from the things that you learned in class. It's not learning any of that. So it has a tendency to sometimes create things that are just not feasible.
Hmm.
And you then have to step in with your skills
Right.
as a designer
Right.
and understand that you can now look at this thing that it outputted and say, okay, this is a great idea. Now I'm going to rejigger it so that it can actually be something that can be made into a physical product.
Correct. Yes. Yes. Because you remember back in the day, especially when we used to work together, we talked about a design button, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes people think that you do, and you said it before that there's a design button that designers literally go and just hit a button and it just creates all of these beautiful things. And then all of a sudden that there's a sample. But
Yeah,
there's so many steps between ideating or between just seeing the colors and the fabrics and then ideating and then sketching and then bringing all of those pieces of the fabric and the textiles together with the trims and also the sketches and sending off the tech pack. For those of you that don't know about a tech pack, look it up, Google that. But it is
yeah,
something that designers have to do in order to get a sample. And so
yeah.
with AI, or even with 3D and AI, it's just amazing of how these things are starting to enhance in a way and enhance in big ways in order to cut down on a lot of things that are even making, which is not a good thing, but cutting down on waste from sample making is a good thing. So yeah, I think that that
That definitely is a good thing. I just feel like the part which you mentioned it also is like coming up with new ideas.
was, mhm.
And that's probably the thing that I take the most issue with
Yes,
because
yes,
as designers, and I just saw another LinkedIn post about this, as designers, most of us don't suffer from a lack of ideas.
correct. Yeah.
We usually suffer from a lack of time to execute those ideas.
Hmm.
So I want tools that help me execute all these ideas that I have, not like give me something that's going to help me get through the tech pack faster. Like I
Yes,
don't need you to spin ideas from me. Like
yes.
no. Like, I want to spin ideas. Like I want my time back so I can spin more ideas. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly, exactly. So I totally understand. So now let's talk about sustainability. And some of my friends, Mikelle and John, know I love talking about sustainability. Why? Because it is the earth. And there were people that thought about us, our forefathers thought about us whenever they were building America, whenever they were building all of these creative things that we now have. So, as designers, as creatives, we have a responsibility to also give back and to also think about how we make or how we do or how we even give back and show the next generation of how to make and how to do. So let's talk about responsibility for designers and think about again, what is it that you are creating? What is it that you are making? And what is the product and the materials? So I want to bring up a book. It's called Cradle to Cradle. This is by William McDonald and also Michael Braggart. Everybody, every designer, no matter what discipline you are in, you should get this book. And this book basically is a book that teaches you as a designer, think about at the very beginning of your process, what are those recyclable or what is those biodegradable or what are those materials and the things that you can create so that you don't end up having a product that sits in a landfill, right? how do you create at the very beginning of the process versus the middle or the end, saying, oh, well, what about, right? And you know, Mikhail, sustainability is one of those things for decades is, oh, well, what about? It's a second thought, it's a trend, it's something that creates a buzz and then the buzz goes down. But
Yeah.
sustainability is something that all designers should definitely think about, talk about, because imagine instead of your product or your material sitting in a landfill, that you made it in out of some seeds, and those seeds actually were able to be replanted into the earth. So then you have a whole soil cycle process, right? And that's
Yeah.
talking about how do we make a circular system so that we can have better product for better people and better planet, right? That's the end goal, is to have a better planet.
Mhm.
So like I said, I wanted to bring up this book. How do we actually start to build better? How do we make better? So Mikhail, with that being said, what are some sustainable practices or ways that you have incorporated into your design process, or even that you've talked to your students about?
Well, the first thing I wanted to also mention is, and I think it definitely gets overlooked constantly, two things. One, that the humanitarian part of sustainability.
Hmm.
So, like, um, the people behind creating these
Yes,
things that may not get paid a living wage,
yes,
that are creating things in factories that are so overheated. The Business of Fashion had an article last summer talking about what happens when it gets too hot to sew
wow.
fashion.
Wow.
Like,
And
I'm
it's
crazy.
climate
Climate change, right,
change.
right.
Yes.
And then the other part of it is overproducing.
Yes. Yes.
And so, to your point, one of the things that I stress to my students, I think it is not only helpful, it makes sense for your bottom line, but
Yes.
also it is helpful to the earth. And that is making sure that you are producing enough, but not overproducing.
Correct.
I talk to a lot of fashion entrepreneurs, and one of the things that we talk about as a business model is a pre order model. So, ahead of time, these are the amount of people who want this.
Nice.
You get the money up front, so it's very good for your pockets,
Nice.
but also you're not overproducing a bunch of stuff
Correct.
that nobody wanted anyway. And now you got all this crap that's sitting in your garage or in a corner of your apartment, and now you got to figure out where you're going to put it, which ultimately you sell it for less,
Right.
and it ends up in a landfill anyway.
Yes. Yes. Yes to all of those points, because at the end of the day, what are the things that we need to start thinking again? Not just designer responsibility, but also people
Hmm.
responsibility. You understand?
Yeah.
Because again, we have to think about, just because you're in accounting, just because you are in, I feel like architecture, design, they kind of understand fashion design and even industrial design. But just because you are over in a different industry doesn't mean that you're not a creative, because you are. We are all innovators, makers, and creatives. So then,
Hmm.
how do you give back to the environment? What is your space, or what are those things that you can start doing? And what are those things that you can start being aware of? So, with that being said, we will end the episode number 2 with some fun facts on sustainability. I love going over fun facts, and especially because these are things that sometimes people are like, "Wait, what? Like, are you serious?" But then once you take it in, you understand it. You're like, "Whoa, wait a minute! If I'm doing this, and there's 10 million of me's also doing this, then guess what? We're all contributing to the same dilemma,
Right.
right? Because at the end of the day, the plastic in the ocean should not be out there. Those are based off of water bottles that we all, in a single plastic use water bottles, end up in the ocean. The
Yeah.
animal life should not be out there chilling in water with water photos, right? That is not fair to them. That is their world, and we are just encamping on their world and just basically saying, "Hey, you can have my trash.
They
Take my
got some
trash."
some new surfboards on with these plastic bottles.
Right. Let's save the world. Let's save the oceans. All right. So, fun facts on sustainability: 95% of clothing that gets thrown away could be recycled or upcycled. And also, if you have any comments on any of these, jump in. 60% of apparel items are in landfills within a year after purchase.
That I can believe, especially with people who are constantly buying
Yeah.
fast fashion. It is it can be addictive.
Yes.
I'm not one of those people,
Me neither.
but I can see how it can be addictive because,
Yeah.
I mean, it feels good to
Yes.
buy 5 or 6 things for $100
Yes.
as opposed to one thing for, 89.99.
Yes.
You feel like you're getting more,
Yeah.
but in reality, you're not. And what happens in a month, you got to go re-up again because that crap that you just bought for $100, those 5 things have all fallen apart.
Correct. And so I just want to bring this up. So this is an old tank top that I have had for years, and the little slice of the arm had come apart. So I literally tied it, and here we go. Bing, we got a whole new tank top. Look at that design, right? That's called innovation. Okay, now going on to the next one. We're all innovators. So the fashion industry is responsible for 20% of total wastewater globally.
Wow.
Almost all textiles are recyclable,
Huh.
right? That's when I read that one. I was like, really?
Yeah.
Percent of the textiles thrown away are recycled,
That I can believe.
right?
Yeah.
And
Most
so,
people just throw stuff out, and I think part of what we have to do just within our industry is to find ways to make it more convenient for people,
yes,
because we can't just rely on folks to feel like they really want to save the planet. I mean, I'm with you. If it's not convenient,
correct,
you know.
correct. But then at the same time, imagine because of our overconsumption, we are having a lasting effect on the next generations. You understand me? So it's not
Yeah,
going to necessarily affect
very
us.
true.
And I think that that's what the issue is that people don't understand that just because you're doing something and it's not going to affect you, that it doesn't affect the next people. And that's exactly
Right.
what's going to happen. And because of overconsumption, it's going to be a time and a place where we're going to have to share resources, literally
Yeah.
share resources. I read in some book that there's going to come a time and a place where even riding in the same car, almost like Ubering, it's almost like borrowing a tool or a hammer. Like people are going to have to start sharing these things because we've thrown so many things away into the landfills. And then I'll read this one. As much as 20% to 35% of all primary source microplastics in the marine environment are from synthetic textiles.
That I can believe, and that is crazy.
Yes. Think about the coral, right? That's the ocean. Like, and if the coral dies, then what is the effects of that, right? What is the effects of plastic, of plastic being in marine life? Like, again, that's our stuff. That's not they're
Mhm.
not out there drinking in water bottles, surfing on, right? On plastic.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are. So how do we end up doing better for the people, for the planet, and also still making a profit? So I want to thank you, my friend Mikelle, for being a guest again today. I want to thank you for your design insights, for your love on Stitch Happens. Is there any last comments or anything you would like to say?
Yes. Buy less.
Nice.
But buy better things.
Yes.
And when you are gonna buy something that's better quality, just not as many of them.
Correct. And I will plug this again, Cradle to Cradle. This is a book that all designers should get. It's about how to design better in the beginning of the process, how to make better, how to create better, again for better planet, better profit, and better people. So I want to thank you again. This is Stitch Happens.
Yes, yes, y'all. Yes, 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 yeah, yeah, yes, yes, y'all.